everybody. I'm Sarah Williams, and welcome back to another episode of What a Time to Be Alive. And we have a friend of mine who is also a sound god, Jehad Choate. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello. It's weird to be in front of a camera.
Yeah, usually Jihad's behind the camera, not directly behind the camera, but holding booms as a on-set recorder, sound engineer, but most notably as a composer.
Yeah.
So today what we're going to kind of talk about is your history as a composer and kind of how you got into sound. It's such a niche thing. It's been very helpful for me as I touch the mic setting up my podcast. It's all right. It's all good.
You seem a little nervous.
Do I?
It's okay. Just go at it with your microphone. You're all right.
Thanks, Boo. No, I'm trying to.
It's not my microphone, so you can do whatever you want.
Okay, I can just beat it up. No, but so we want to talk a little bit about how you got into sound and all that encompasses. And you're kind of an expert in classical music, so you're going to give me a history lesson and school me on some classical music because I'm not very educated on it. And talk about also your thought that when we're considering what it is to be a classical musician or what classical music is, being a bit more inclusive with other cultures and other musicians and composers that were alive during that time. Right?
Yeah.
I dig it. Okay, I got that right.
Sorry, I need to learn how to talk more. I'm just so used to being so quiet behind a microphone.
And yet you're a talker in real life.
I know. It's
Talks a lot.
I got the headphones on. Once I have the headphones on, professional mode happens.
Shut up. No, but okay, I want to hear how you first got into sound because it is such a niche thing. When we're watching movies, we know if it's good.
Yep.
We know if it's bad, but in between, we don't notice it.
Well, ever since I was young, I had ears. Well, actually, when it came to being a part of sound in general and actually approaching the engineering aspect of it, I didn't really get into it until I was probably about 16, 17 years old.
What does it mean also to be a sound engineer?
Mostly it means that all real engineers will never call you an engineer. But ultimately it's trying to make sure that you can either capture or manipulate the aesthetics of sound. So the knowledge that goes behind it is usually sound reinforcement. So being able to look at a room and be like, oh, well, yeah, this is going to be reflective or this sounds really dead, and trying to make sure that whatever you do, it sounds either accurate to what the client wants you to have,
Okay.
or as creative as the client wants you to have.
Okay.
Yeah, I've mostly been a musician most of my life. Since I was a little kid, I was always on the keyboard, and my sister was in band, and she was in marching band, and
I know you were in marching band too.
Yeah, I'm
I've heard some stories.
Yeah, I got in a marching band like any chubby kid would. He didn't want to go into gym, so and I was like, well, if my sister can do it, I can do it too.
I can do it. How many instruments do you play?
I play a lot of them. It's really hard to say which ones because honestly, when I'm writing for something new, I'm learning all different facets of it, not only fingering positions, but how much breath support goes behind any kind of wind instruments, what's the range, what's the tonal quality within that range. So I'll learn it for the stuff that I decide to write.
And to get the effect that you want in your writing.
Yeah. Well, I truly started off on euphonium, which is can you guess what a euphonium is?
It's a phone that goes ring ring. And it's euphone.
I like that. That's a good start. Euphonium, or there's two versions of it. It's either called a baritone horn or a euphonium. And basically it looks like a tiny tuba, but it has the range of a tenor trombone, but it has a really lush low end. And
Hey-o.
Yeah, it's all about that bottom. And when I was in 6th grade, that's what I started officially learning how to read music on.
Did you start it and choose that instrument because it's smaller than an actual tuba and you were a child?
No.
No.
I initially wanted to be a trumpet player, and then I saw all the kids that were going into trumpet, and I was like, I'm not going to be first chair that way. Work smarter, not harder.
There you go. It's important to be first chair. I like it.
So Oh, I started off on that, and the interesting thing about public music education, at least when I was in it, is that we didn't actually have true theory courses. Like a lot of the things that they emphasize nowadays, and especially in the college level, we didn't have access to it. It was mostly like, hey, these are what the notes are going to be associated
Right.
with. Play this shit. Or sorry, can I cuss
You
in
can
this?
cuss. Yeah, we can say shit.
Shit,
That's
fuck,
fine.
cut.
All right. We really went for it that time.
Sorry, it's for George Carlin.
That's what's up.
you know, but yeah, they're like, "Yo, play this shit," and you know, then when that's it. Like, and
Right.
anybody who was in band in like middle school, they didn't really understand what was going on. It's kind of like private school, you know.
Yeah. Well, and you're also not like learning the history or the context of like where this music's coming from. I mean, I played piano growing up a little bit, but I did choir, and we weren't learning theory or
Yeah,
history. We were just
and
this is
just
a
do
C
it.
and sing a C, and
Yeah,
yeah.
and anybody who actually wanted to go that next level because it was something that they were passionate about, they learned on their own. And it was kind of funny because like my middle school band director, I remember him giving us our first piece of music. I told him it was garbage, and and he's like, "Well, you guys were just learning." I was like, "No, no, no. The music is garbage." And he legit told me, he's like, "Well, if you think you can do better, then you should try." And I took that entire summer between sixth grade and seventh grade to learn composition. And then I
Wow.
wrote my first march, and it was garbage too. Don't get me wrong, but he looked at it and he was like, "Hey, you could actually do something with this. You should keep at it." And like, I've kept that with me.
So in your life, is spite one of your biggest drivers?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. It's
Highly
actually kind of funny
motivating.
because the other thing he said afterwards is, "Don't become a music teacher because that means you're a failed musician." I did it all.
Jehad Choate as a professor of music.
Well, that like we'll get
We'll
into
get to
that,
that. We'll get to that.
but yeah. So as I was learning how to be part of a band, which is really important when you are also working in sound amongst like actors and actresses
Right, yeah, on
and
set and
whatnot, and being part of a team. And you start to learn about balance and blend and how you can read a room so that way certain things resonate better or not, depending on what you want to do.
right, the way you want it to go.
Yeah, so that was like your first aspect of like acoustics. And then like learning the technical aspects, you just kind of learn from people telling you you're garbage or not. So you like the fun part about growing up and being in a baritone slash euphonium section is that the people who select that instrument, they're very, very unique people. In the sense
I
that
would imagine.
I hate to be a generalizing person, but at the same time, it's usually a very cocky people that they'll be like, "Yo, I can play that melody too. I'm gonna play that melody right now. I'm gonna play it louder than trumpets because screw the trumpets."
Screw the trumpets. It reminds me of an episode of Scrubs where one of the nurses is like defining the different types of doctors, and like the surgeons were like the jocks, and they just want to cut people up, and sounds like that. Each instrument, you were drawn to whatever vibe that put out.
Only we all turned into into the Todd afterwards.
Right?
It's like I can hit that, I can hit that, I can hit
Isn't
that.
that who we all want to be?
Oh, of course, of course. But yeah, like then once you're in that kind of that kind of group, you
You're indoctrinated.
yeah, you learn what works and what doesn't work. You develop a certain attitude that borders between competition and teamwork. And then at the end of it, like you end up having lifelong friends. Like my best
Yeah.
friends, I still talk to this day, and we were in the baritone section together. Actually, a lot of the low brass people in general.
Is it kind of like Whiplash, where I'm obviously that's a very like aggressive version of this, but where you're kind of constantly fighting for first chair?
No. Like it started that way, like when we were super, super young. But then it kind of got into that point where when you're a teenager, you kind of know who's the musicians and who's not the musicians.
Gotcha. Who has the
And
natural talent knack and
and you're just like you get settled into your points. And a lot of times it'll be like seniority. So like
mm.
the seniors will most likely be first chair unless they're really, really bad. But yeah, so being around that was really like the core start of
Got you into
my
it.
love affair with the sonic culture.
As it were, I like that phrase, the sonic culture.
I
And then
know.
and then presumably you went to college. And what did you study there?
Well, first I went to community college
Ah, I did that as well.
because we don't know what we're gonna do, and like when you go into community college, you literally don't know what what was going on. And I was in bands. I was playing all around town and stuff. And then finally, it like hit me. I'm like, I really want to record an album, but I can never afford to record an album. So why don't I just start taking some classes in Valencia College, which I is where I ended up teaching like 10 years later.
That's wonderful.
Um,
In Florida.
yeah,
From
in
Florida.
Florida. They had a music production and audio technology course, or not course, but program that was so good that they didn't even advertise at that point. It was always by word of
That was
mouth.
like the place to go.
Yeah, and
Interesting.
anybody who came out of there, even if said that you had like an associate's degree, it didn't matter because like you knew your shit. And there's we didn't have the most up to date technology, but we knew how to fix our technology.
Nice.
Like, because
Crafty.
oh yeah, at that time there was another college that came out that was still trying to be accredited called Full Sail, and when Full
Like
Sail,
wholesale.
well yeah, and Full Sail, and like you're gonna get some backlash with this. Full Sail was
Because I
they
said wholesale.
no they have a lot of money, okay,
Oh, okay.
so they had all the brand new stuff, and their programs were like simulating how the actual recording world is going to be. So you had like classes in the middle of the night and crap like
Oh,
that,
jeez.
but they were charging like so much per credit hour when they weren't credited at the time. So
Ah,
people were being funneled into two camps. It was either you go over to there and you get to play with all the newest toys, or you stay where you're at and you learn with what you're
really
supposed
learn
to
the
do.
skills. Yeah.
Yeah,
Get the education.
and there was often like I wouldn't say a rivalry, but mostly like just a lot of shit talking
Right.
on our end. And I mean, don't get me wrong, Full Sail now is fantastic. They do whatever they got to do to get things done, and they're accredited now.
I
So
like it. They made it.
yeah, they own like one section of Central Florida, including an ale house. So
Damn. Yeah, that's got to be profitable,
yeah,
especially in Florida.
they got that money. And like that type of community also inspires you to try to be better because
Of course. Yeah.
y-
Rivalries can do that.
yeah, it's always competition and teamwork, just hand in hand.
Both. I think that's kind of life, though, isn't it? I mean, we're all kind of striving to be our next better version of ourselves or collectively in a, on a campus or in a program, but, we got
True.
to work together to accomplish it.
Yeah, yeah. And that course in general, like it wasn't just sound. It was also like learning about lighting, being in the field of whatever was going on. Of course, I went straight into the studio work, but there was a lot of people that would go on to the film program over there.
Hmm,
That film program, Steven Spielberg actually like said it was good.
that's legit.
I mean, it was like, 15, 20 years ago, but at the
Right.
same time, if Spielberg said, yo, it's good, you're going to hold on to that.
That's what's up. I went to Long Beach State and Spielberg also went to Long Beach State. So
There you
I didn't
go.
study film there, but, I was around people who did.
Neither did he,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Be like, yo, you don't figure out how to make Jaws over in community
You
college.
don't. No, you don't. No. Okay, so
Yeah.
you went to school, you
Yeah.
learned your craft.
Well, I learned a little bit of it, and then I was mostly just playing with a bunch of bands and recording an album and doing a lot of crazy stuff. And then finally, I got to a point where I wasn't really sure that I wanted to be in that position anymore because I was being recognized as a good writer, but I saw where some other acts were going, and I was like, if this is where the top part is, I don't really like it. And
Interesting.
don't get me wrong, like there's so many people back home that I have tremendous respect for, and I just knew that there was a part of my life that I couldn't accomplish if I was there, and I felt like I was so towny that I wasn't going to be able to escape that. And then I got really pissed off at my band. And I
Band
decided,
drama.
yeah, well, and then I decided, I was like, yeah, let me just see what kind of colleges I could actually get into. So I applied to like 10 different music colleges, and I don't even know why. I had no intentions of going to any of
I
them.
feel like this was out of spite again. Like
Yeah,
someone said, you couldn't get into a college, man. And you're like, watch me, bitch.
yeah, yeah. It's always about taking the shit on somebody's lawn. Figuratively, of course.
Naturally, of course.
As I turn to the camera. um,
So you got into, I'm guessing, several programs that you applied to.
9 out of 10.
Nice.
The one that I was actually really considering, they were the only ones that didn't accept me.
That's the way that cookie always tends to crumble.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Miami because I wanted to be closer to home. But then like better schools got my attention, and I was like, oh, okay, well, let's see who came from where. And then I settled for Berklee College of Music in Boston.
Settled.
I know, settled,
Berkeley.
right? Like settling is like, $100,000 in debt. What?
Oof, man alive.
Yeah.
But Berkeley, I mean, that name carries weight.
Yeah, yeah, not the EY, but the EE. The EY is what's over here on this side.
You know what's? I just figured it was a satellite version of that school, the Berkeley.
No, there's
but that's
two
funny.
guys.
Whenever you've said Berkeley, I've just always assumed
Nah.
Berkeley.
There's a guy whose last name was Burke, and another guy whose last name was Lee. Back in like, what was it, the 40s? They decided they wanted to have a true jazz school. They opened it up on Mass Ave on the 150 building, which used to be a brothel.
I love the history of this school.
And then as they soaked up so much money, then they were able to buy up enough of the area. They even have a graduate school in Valencia, Spain, which is weird because my first school was called Valencia.
You were always meant to go to Valencia, Spain, study or teach there.
I ain't going there.
I ain't going there. Okay, so you went to fake Berkeley. Yeah. I'm just kidding.
Oh shit. Yo, we actually had like our shirts in like the bookstore. We had stuff like that at the time where it's like EE not EY, and we'd have shot glasses that were like whole notes, half notes. And yeah, we were cool people.
You gotta differentiate. I like it.
Yeah. So I went over there, and it was the most humbling experience you could ever have in your life, because I went there as a guitarist. I came out of there as a writer. And because every guitarist there was either John Mayer style or John Mayer himself or Dream Theater style. And for me, I just always played my own music. And I only did it because I'm a narcissist, and you play what you want to hear. But when I did my audition, I remember they asked me, they're like, where did you get that music from? And I was like, that's mine. And I think that's the reason why I got in.
Really? Wow.
And I learned a lot of really great fundamentals. I met a lot of great musicians, a lot of intensely great musicians. I even worked as a journalist over there for a while too.
Oh,
wow. And
you
then
can write with words and with notes.
Yeah. And actually I had a weird side hustle because there was a lot of programs that would be based off of like music therapy or whatever, and you still had to do like composition classes, and some of these folks didn't know how to write for the life of them. Yeah. So I used to have a hustle where I would write for them. Me that. Yeah, and it'd be like, okay, well, how long do I have? How many pages do I need? Okay, this is how much it'll be. And it worked out pretty well for me.
That's hilarious.
And I was like, if anybody ever stopped me, I'll be like, yo, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing.
I'm writing music.
Yeah.
Someone wants to pay me to do it? Hey, even better.
Yeah.
So what made you
can't take back that degree now?
Did you just feel like you were such a stronger writer than you were musician, or you just kind of fell in love with writing?
Honestly, I think I was surrounded with a lot of yes men at a point as a guitarist, where I think people were just not used to how I played, that it was construed as like really, really good. But when I juxtaposed that between me and like somebody who clearly knew what they were doing, now I just kind of see it as a tool.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And that also it holds you back a little bit, because afterwards I didn't really want to be in bands anymore. I was just like, man, fighting all those promoters and trying really hard to be as passionate as I possibly can while still trying to approach the writing aspect. It was rough.
It's a lot. It's a lot to do. And I feel like in anything that's so highly competitive like that, or being an actor or host or, whatever it is, you can't always have your finger in a bunch of different pies. You kind of have to pick a focus and just go for it because it takes so much effort and passion to really be successful.
Yep. Yep.
So here we are.
Yeah. Oh, and then I got a master's degree. So
Okay.
but we don't need to go all the way into that.
We wouldn't need to go into detail for everything.
Yeah.
We don't have 5 hours.
I know.
I would love to hear it, but
there's a CV out there. You can just
we'll attach that to the podcast posting. So you graduated, you got a master's, you went back to teach. I think we've established you as an expert in the field of sound design and composition.
A little bit.
Something that I find interesting too is, obviously you weren't. See, I just need to get used to this. I'm a hand talker. I'm a hand talker.
Talk like this.
Right, yeah. I'm just like, I'll just sit on my hands while we record. It won't look aesthetically good on the camera,
you
but
don't
it'll sound
want to be
better.
doing the Thriller as you're doing this?
I'll just talk with my left hand.
It's not going to work.
I know it. I'm going to keep doing it. Anyhow, so you were obviously in bands, and I'm sure you played more, current music, contemporary music. And I feel like as a composer, and correct me if I'm wrong in this because you are here to educate me on this whole topic.
I like that.
I've always thought of composers as almost like classical musicians. Like it's, I don't know, music without singing is like a different, I don't know, it's so different. What drew you to that? And fill in my question with the correct jargon.
Okay, well, the definition of a composer is somebody who puts things together.
Okay, so it could be any type of music.
Yeah, any type genre. Of music.
You could be a reggae composer.
To a certain degree. Here's the interesting thing is that this actually I learned this when I was back in Berkeley, when I would be like, oh yeah, I'm playing the song, and a teacher would be like, no, if it's jazz, it's a tune. If it's a song, it's a song, and if it's orchestral, it's a piece. And like the semantics were annoying, but I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll go with that. But truthfully, as somebody who writes the notes, puts them together, and puts them into context, I am a composer. I've dabbled in songwriting, but honestly, I'm more focused on just the context of all the ideas being put into one specific channel.
I see.
So
it's quite different, actually.
Yeah. And it's good that you mentioned classical because
as a segue,
that was another argument of semantics that I had to deal with from an early age, where I would I used to ignorantly just say, oh, classical music is just all orchestral music, and that's the end of that.
That's kind of what yeah. That's my basic understanding.
Yeah, and then I had a teacher who made it known in the nicest way possible that when it comes to classical music, it was more so a timepiece where you're looking at Haydn, you're looking at Mozart, that's considered classical. When you get to Beethoven, that's when you have your romantic, and then you have impressionist and all this other stuff. And I like there's always the thing that irked me about it, and I was like, do any of these composers really like consider themselves these particular labels, or is it just history that tells you what it is?
Well, but you could argue that with other arts, or especially painting. Like you have an impressionistic paintings, and you have neoclassical and whatever, and modern. But I don't know within that time period you're necessarily assigning yourself, or if it's assigned later.
Yeah, just like the concept of being a millennial, right?
Right. I didn't choose that title.
Yeah, and like we didn't ask to be born this way, okay? But like nobody was talking about or using the word millennial back in 1999 or
of course,
or even 1986 or whenever you were kind of born.
Whenever you were born.
Yeah, like that was
85 to 95. Yeah.
They were like, okay, we need to classify something, so let's just put a name on it, and then that way we can blame them for everything. Like that's the problem with historically humanity. I'm
right.
Sorry.
Well, and so with classical music, it is just a time period. So even if you had someone that did classical style music 20 years after, quote, classical music time frame, they're not considered a classical musician at that point?
Well, if they're, and this is the argument of semantics, if they're doing that time period, then they are playing classical music. But
if you were composing in the stylings of a classical musician.
And that's where it gets funky, because like when you go to like in the 1930s, one really amazing composer who did a lot of romantic stuff that Beethoven would do, Richard Strauss, he obviously wasn't part of the Romantic era, but he was a proponent of it. So they made it, whoops, without me
See?
hitting the microphone, a neo-romantic era. Just like
Gotcha.
there's a neoclassical.
Neoclassical.
Just like there's neo, the time was it the the year of the gentleman. No, that's album.
I didn't get it. It
It's
went over
okay.
my head. Neo from the Matrix, I know
And
that.
there's Neo from the Matrix.
So what's really interesting to me about that though is that would you consider classical music as a genre of music? Because I would, and then I would also consider jazz a genre, or reggae a genre, or pop a genre, and yet you have jazz that was written or composed, in the 1910s, and you still have modern jazz, which I guess I'm already qualifying it. So maybe I've answered my own question.
It seems like it. I like that question. Honestly, it just like a lot of different classifications in our life. You could see it as a genre, you could see it as a time period, but this is where it kind of the segues into the problem behind these certain classifications is that now when if you are a new and living composer and you're trying to put music out there, there are inherent biases onto what exactly you're doing. um do you want me to get into it?
Yeah, first I feel like let's define as you would in today's paradigm of what classical music is. Can you define it in its parameters?
Merriam-Webster
Right?
defines classical in three different ways. One, it's usually relating to Roman and Greek time. Number two is they do say it
Oh,
as a genre. And number three, they do say it as a time period. So,
interesting. Okay.
like, as far as clarification goes, there is no clarification.
Is there a modern colloquial understanding within your world of composition
Um,
of what constitutes classical? Or my
yeah, for the most part, and that is what leads to a lot of problems as well
right?
too.
Because it's Eurocentric.
Yeah,
It's from a certain time period.
yeah, and that's the thing is that the problem is we're not getting as much like response as we should. Let's before we get into the easy and light topic of race, I think
But how
that
apropos?
I think it's really important to also like look at the time period now. When you think of a composer, like a modern living composer,
Mhm.
present company excluded, who do you normally think of?
Hans Zimmer, and that's it.
Yeah, Hans Zimmer, John Williams,
Yes.
Danny Elfman.
Okay. Yes.
You're looking at film composers.
Right.
Now, the writing ability or the writing style for film is very different from concert, and it's also very different from video games as well too.
Didn't
And
consider video games. Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, and actually a lot of people haven't for a while.
But it
But
makes
it's
perfect sense.
but it's pretty amazing. And one could even construe that the reason why I even got into like being a musician was because of video games. Like I played Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse. Every song on there was banging.
Was lit, yo.
And I was just like, and I sucked at the game, so it's the same stuff just repeating over and over again. And like it just stuck with me. And there's a wide variety of styles and a 16-bit chip tunes. But that's the thing, though, is how do you define how you listen to instrumental music
Right.
and whether or not it actually like works to like push the culture or not. If you are judging a piece of music that's made for film as you would for a concert, it's not going to be the same
When
experience.
totally different intentions on the composer's part. I mean,
Exactly. When you write music for a film, which I've done a number of them here in in
Los
Long Beach.
Angeles.
One of the things that you have to keep in mind is that you're working with a director and a production crew, so that way you can realize their vision.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily mean you have these giant, lush melodies or like highly rhythmic parts because you don't want to step over dialogue or even the vision of the scene that you have. So a lot of
You're
it,
almost there to supplement
yeah, it's
rather
very
than lead.
subtle. It's very it's like sprinkling around the moment.
And generally evoking an emotion,
Yeah.
setting a tone.
And sometimes you can sneak in some melodies here and there. A lot of times it's a textural thing. So if I was to have that being performed on stage, it sucks.
I used to work in ticketing for like live ticket events, and I remember like Danny Elfman Presents, and it was always at the Hollywood Bowl, and there were different versions of this, but you would have a symphony basically playing along with the film, so you
Mhm.
get like the live music, but always played to the film,
Yeah,
which it was created for.
and those sections of music are split up into cues. So sometimes when you want to depict of a moment of hesitance, you'll just have like a bunch of violins playing one note and like an unmeasured tremolo. Yeah. And that's just to keep you on the edge of your seat. That's
Right.
it's not necessarily musical, but at the same time, texturally, it gives you a concept to work with.
It reminds me of Sarah Marshall,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
the lead guy is the composer or whatever, the sound guy for the show, and he's like, "I'm just playing sad tones for this murder scene."
Yeah. And it's not as exciting, but at the same time, for the end result, it makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
On the flip side, as a concert composer, you have to do whatever you can to make sure people stay their asses in their seats. So like I just finished this 15-minute behemoth of a piece, and like I was showing it to some of my director friends, and they're like, "Yeah, man, it's like really long though." I'm like, "Yeah, it's
It's not
long."
meant for your film, buddy.
Yeah, it's not meant for
Braun.
film. Actually, I think it was Braun that I talked to about
Yeah,
it.
figures.
But, yeah, it's not meant for that. It's meant to keep people in their seats,
Right.
and with that, there's not repetition, or there's very minimal repetition, and there's the things that you would use, cinematically, they just won't work for that, like, unless you have visuals.
Right.
So, it's a different aspect, and then video games. Video games, very briefly, it takes a lot of brain power to do what you need to do with it because, basically, it's interactive music, so it's not the same thing being repeated over and over again. If I'm playing an RPG and my character is moving from here to there, and there's a boss over there, you have to write specific music that times well enough that you don't hear that transition and it's not choppy.
It's very
Eh,
subtle, but
but
yet changes.
yeah, it's kinda like if you go to, like, Disney World or I guess Disneyland here, and you're going to different sections and the music changes, you don't really notice how that's happening,
Yeah.
but it's planned out, it's timed in the right kinda way.
Unlike being in a department store in between the junior section and the old lady section, and you're hearing like pop, and then you're hearing 70s
Yeah.
rock, soft rock. See, boom, did it again, did it again. Less planned out.
So,
I
yeah.
digress. So you prefer, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but composing as like a symphony for live music, right? That's kind of your
Uh,
passion, your dream, but you can do it all.
truth be told, I prefer just getting paid. I mean, at this point in my life, I don't really have a lot to prove on like what I know and what ideas I want to convey.
Is that like a dream though for you to have a symphony perform a piece that you've written?
I mean, it would be a reoccurring dream. I've had it done already,
Okay.
but it would be nice to have it done for every piece that I've premiered.
Okay.
Like this new piece that I have, I'm doing something different. I'll just make a mock-up because that's the cheapest way to do things these days, and then I'll, like, try to make it as good as sounding as possible,
And
and
you
then
just recording that on your own
yeah,
or creating the sounds in
yeah,
your studio.
yeah, and then I'll put it out there and, make my fraction of a penny from every stream that comes out there. But I wanted to do this in a traditional but untraditional way, where I wanna have a premiere of my piece of music. But the problem is that when you try to approach a lot of these major, um, orchestras, they treat you like A&R departments for, like, recording studios. They don't want to, accept unsolicited material. So you need to solicit it by getting an agent, but you can't get an agent unless you are able to solicit your unsolicited material. So you're just a snake eating its own
Yeah.
tail over and over again. And I think there's a better way for this. And so I've been annoying a lot of orchestras, and I think I might have a new option where I'm going to need some help from other composers in this process, but I'm just going to have it where with the listing of orchestras in specific states, just have people send letters and
Like,
send
listen to my friend, listen to this,
be like,
guys.
I would go
Check
to
out
this.
Jihad.
I would go to this if this person was playing, and that is soliciting.
In a different, indirect
Yeah,
solicitation.
without having to deal with any kind of financial advisor
Right.
or anything obscene like that.
And I feel like this is a good kind of segue into the crux of our topic, which is you feel that because of your race is part of the reason that you're not being seen by some of these orchestras, being a person of color, that there's a tendency for these organizations to
I
hire or play the music of white men.
it's so like I'm so glad you have a camera just to see how uncomfortable it is for you to say
Race
that.
is not, it's not comfortable to talk about, and as a white person it's not easy to talk about, but I think it's important to have these conversations,
It
but they're not
is.
comfortable.
I
Did it get
think
sweaty in here? I'm just
it,
kidding.
it's those lights.
The lights are bright.
um, I do think that there are inherent biases that have been like I wouldn't. I'm not gonna go to the length of saying that that a lot of these orchestras have like institutional racism. Like I don't think it gets. I don't think it's that point, but I think there's a lot of passive aggressive
Yeah.
situations that have
Well,
unfolded.
and I think if it were that straightforward, it'd be a little bit easier to fix.
Yeah,
It's a very complex issue.
and it's actually good that you mentioned this because I was actually part of a really strong diversity conversation a couple weeks ago with people from the Kaleidoscope Orchestra, and they were amazing. I mean, it is not easy to talk about this stuff, and they put on a Zoom call, and there was like a couple hundred of us,
Wow, that's
and
fantastic.
yeah, and like the head guy Benjamin was just like, "Speak your mind," and everybody like muted when they needed to, and nobody got cut off. Even I got to talk, which was great.
That's phenomenal.
And the part of that conversation, one of the issues that we're running into is the narrative of classical music, and the problem is that a lot of people are only seeing or they're only hearing one side of it, which is the Eurocentric side. They're saying it's only classical if Bach or Mozart or even Beethoven. I know there's a teacher out there that's like whatever, but like the generic listener is
Yes.
going to like
To
approach that.
recognize.
And if you've noticed, those names that I've said are all white men. Now, there is well, what's to say that there isn't classical music from other countries?
Well, and going with your definition of classical music as music composed within a certain time period, then Africa has classical music,
You know,
and China
India,
has classical music, and India, and
America,
Mexico. Yeah.
and American
Canada.
American classical music. I mean, like if we start looking at it from an origin point of view, where if it wasn't for this particular brand of writing and performance, we wouldn't have X, you know, then you have to acknowledge an Afrocentric style or Indocentric style as
Right.
well. And because if it wasn't for African music, then we wouldn't have our our classical composers, which are everybody from Miles Davis,
Right.
Coltrane. I mean, jazz is
Motown, jazz.
yeah,
Hello.
yeah, jazz is everything for us. We
It's,
wouldn't
it's one of
have
the great things we created, America.
rock and roll, we wouldn't have reggae, we wouldn't have a lot of aspects of great music, publicly acceptable music too, where you could dance to it and you don't have to wear a powdered wig for it.
Right.
Like
Thank God.
like it's very important, and that what's to say that isn't classical music? It is classic. It is a point of origin for us. It is a staple in society. It's a staple in culture. So
So with, sorry. So with your point in this is almost redefining what it means to be classical,
redefining the narrative,
which would be any music that kind of was a catalyst or a change
a
for a
point of
new time, a
origin.
point of
Yeah,
origin.
yeah,
Okay.
a
Okay.
point of origin. And I know that they're like trying to track this back will even go as far as folk music and like where does all these little bits and pieces come from? But there there's an era if we're looking at a timeline That's you said it perfectly. Like we have our own classical timeline of music just as much as Germany did or Spain or Africa or India, and it needs to be acknowledged. Now the problem that we're having, especially in the orchestral community, is that a lot of the times when they're programming music, they'll mostly just do the hits of Eurocentric music. And I know it's really tough to be able to acknowledge a lot of African, like classical styles because a lot of it was done like vocally. It was
With
done,
different
yeah,
instruments or
orally.
yeah,
No, it was
okay.
done orally between
Okay.
people, so there wasn't like a set written like part of it.
It's almost kind of like a folk music in that way.
Yeah, and the problem with that is that if by chance you would try to translate African music into a European style of writing, is that compromising the integrity of the original thing? And to which I would respond, it is imperative that all music has an ability to be adaptable, so that way we can continue it on, so that way somebody knows what's going on. Because we've seen Afrocentric music um, get mixed up with the Western concepts. We've had so many great new genres come out because of it. We have a lot of the Afro-Cuban music, salsa.
Salsa.
You'll have
Flamenco.
yeah, and of course, well, yeah,
Those are just fun
everything,
words to say.
and then that's taking a lot of like syncopated beats that were passed on orally between people and putting it onto the page. And because of that, like that's where we have our catalyst. That's where we have our point of
Point of
origin.
origin.
So the problem with these orchestras only programming the Eurocentric music is they've attenuated both of the culture that surrounds them and their like style to just that. And so when a composer like me comes through, where my background, I'm half Trinidadian, so I have calypso in my background, I have soca in my background. If you don't even know what
I
those
don't know what
are,
that is. I know what calypso is, but
it's
I don't
it's
know soca.
oh,
Soca, but it's fun to say too.
babies were born because of that music.
Ayo.
It's a but the important thing is I like to incorporate my cultural background
Yeah.
behind it as well. And like calypso and soca are also like part of Afrocentric music as well. So when these directors are having calls for scores, what's to say that they're not being transparent? So like what's to say that they're not judging my music on whether it's good or bad as much as they're judging it as is it a good Eurocentric style music?
Yeah. I
So
that's so challenging to address though. I feel like as they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I feel like with art, it often is. Maybe you saw the episode of It's Always Sunny. Classic. Onga Goblogian, I believe he was. uh, anyhow, that's a digression, but basically in the episode, Danny DeVito's character tries to prove that sometimes art is an air conditioner could be a piece of art.
oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's when he
And
does the
so
Warhol.
it's yeah,
Like, yeah.
that's his character Ongo Goblogian. But so it's got to be incredibly challenging to prove that your form of this art is
It's valid.
valid. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Because if I'm not a huge performance art fan per se, and so if I were a gatekeeper somehow with
yeah,
different types of art, I might not include that just because of my own internal biases. It's very challenging.
exactly. And to even go a level further, another issue, and I'm gonna call out the LA Phil for this. I sent an email out to them because I was just like, you know what, I need to get this piece premiered. What can I do? And of course, they told me the unsolicited thing.
Of course.
And then they're like, but we have these programs that you could do. There's residency programs that a lot of orchestras do, and like youth programs. Now,
Is that like an unpaid?
no, it can be paid.
Okay.
Sometimes you get a stipend, but there is always a catch. Like the youth program, obviously not gonna do that because I'm old as shit now.
You're not a child anymore, Jehad.
Yeah. It's like it cuts off at like 19 or 20 or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have the soft spot in my head anymore. We're not going to do that.
Well, and it also limits a bit, folks who maybe grew up in the sticks,
Yeah.
who don't have opportunities that the cities folk have for
Very
these types
true.
of things.
Very true. So there is that. So, which is great because, the children are our
Great for
future.
children. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
think about the
Wonderful.
children.
The children. How about
But
you, the children? How about you, the children?
oh, ooh, that was good.
Thank you.
You were in chorus.
I sure was. Anyhow.
The other problem is the residencies. With these residencies, they offer like an ability to be like a live-in composer. Basically, you live in the
Okay.
town. You get your pieces played, and they refer to you for the practices, and you learn from that orchestra as well. It's kind of
Okay.
like an internship, but it sounds good,
It's almost
right?
like a medical residency is what it kind of sounds
Yeah,
like.
it's
Like,
pretty
yeah,
much that. Only
similar.
we don't save lives.
Right. It's fine.
We save souls. No.
Soul. You need your soul.
But the problem with the
Sorry, I got a
residency
joke.
program.
You give Stella her groove back. Okay.
No, it's all right. It's all
Problem with
right.
residencies.
Yep. The problem with residencies is they also have an age bracket as well,
Ah,
and I mentioned this on the that big conversation before, where they actually aged out people by like 30.
oh, that seems young.
It is very young, and before this was the particular one for the LA Phil that I saw, and the interesting thing is that a lot of composers, like especially people who finally get themselves established, we're all old. Like it's either you're super young and you're like like Mozart doing
Right.
doing whatever you need to do, or you are above the
You're
age of
prodigy
30
or yeah.
and you got gray
Yeah.
hair, and that's kind of how it is.
It's a complex art to learn and perfect.
Yeah,
Takes
and
decades.
the problem with that was I even asked this question to everybody on that call. Is like, for those of you who have just finished your master's degree, are you under the age of 30? And nobody rose their hand. And that's something to
That's the
think about.
point.
So in a musical culture, they're telling you, even though this is a art form that can be mastered by people who don't get degrees, and some of my like biggest influences, they've never went to any school for it, but they're telling you that you need to do this now. And then you put all this money into school, and you try your darndest, and then all of a sudden, like, you get put into a category of what type of musician you're going to be, and then you're like, well, I need to make money, so I need to have something stable.
Of course.
So you get another degree so that way you can be able to teach, and then after you get that degree, then you're like, oh, now I'm here, I'm at that point, let me start putting out my music. And then they're like, oh, you're too old.
Do you feel like that's partially though that it's a highly, highly, highly competitive field? I
Oh,
mean,
it's definitely like you will see a million of us.
right.
There's I call them support groups, but they're Facebook groups, where like we all talk about all of our experiences, and I mean you got to have a sense of humor,
Of course, yeah.
and just like you can't be a composer only in your life, you have to have a side hustle.
And you have heard of the actor slash waiter.
Oh yeah, of course.
I feel similar
Yeah,
similar vibes. I
and
get it.
that's the thing. The hardest part about it is like, when you have a master's degree in it,
Right.
like there's a societal shift that's supposed to happen that never does. But not to sound entitled, what the biggest problem is that when you do have these types of residencies, what they're really doing is they're saying, hey, we don't want older people, we don't want people who already have that experience, we want them young, so that way they're still impressionable. This is the vibe that I'm getting. Please prove me wrong. Please prove me wrong.
Call to action, y'all.
It seems like child labor, and I even said it out loud. I was like, this is child labor. You don't want to pay for a composer. You don't want new music. You want to be able to get them when they're young, so you can tell them the music that you want to do, that they should be doing for you. And as a film composer, I already get that from directors. I don't like, as a concert composer, I'm trying to push new and refreshing ideas for
Yeah.
culture. See what I mean?
Yes.
So you have all that stuff, and then you get offered these residencies and these opportunities, and they don't seem like opportunities at all.
Can I ask too, with a residency? So let's just say you were to do your residency with the LA Philharmonic for whatever time that is allotted, and then what's the end game there? Are they hiring you full time, Are you now you have this on your resume, so the expectation is you're now a well-known quote composer that you can go anywhere?
Considering I have not achieved that yet,
Right. But
I
what is the point then?
I would assume it's a lot like getting a SAG card.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so you did
It's
this.
a validation
Yeah,
point and a stepping stone.
it's a validation point, stepping stone, and then by that point, if you're getting it premiered by such a large, well-paid
Prestigious.
orchestra, then there should be other options for you.
I'd say then it's more like winning an Oscar than getting your second. I'm just kidding.
No, no, it's definitely a
Just
SAG card
kidding.
because that shit can't expire.
Ah.
You're still paying your dues because you're still alive.
Interesting. So it's yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why I would say that there is an issue of race and diversity that is plaguing the orchestral community. If you look at a lot of these the board of directors, and I'm not talking about anything from like newer orchestras that are like incorporating hip hop and whatnot. Like obviously, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like the well established ones.
These
Yeah.
institutionalized
How many of those
metropolitan
people are
orchestras.
not brown and not wrinkled?
So what would and this isn't an easy question by any means, but and solutions to these problems are never simple, but what are some steps that you think these types of organizations could begin to take to start incorporating a bit more diversity, be it both racially and ageally? Not a
Asia.
word.
I think the first thing they need to acknowledge is that there is an entire generation of composers that aren't children and they're not geriatrics. They're right in the middle. They're ready to work.
Just peeps
They
in the
know.
prime of their life.
Yeah, they're ready to work. They're ready to do what they need to get done to put the right kind of music out there. And by right kind of music, I mean something that actually reflects the people around them. Like
Not something tired, not something we've heard before, something new and innovative and interesting and
something you
emotional.
would want to go see. Like
Right.
honestly, when's the last time you went to an orchestral performance?
It's been a very long time. I probably went when my friend had free tickets, and I went with her.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a Vivaldi candlelight
Ah,
uh,
Vivaldi.
concert with Brendan for his birthday, but that was just a four-piece string quartet,
Mm-hmm.
which was lovely. But yeah,
But
not often.
have you ever been excited to go and see it? To go see an orchestra, be like, oh
To see
man,
an
I
orchestra,
can't wait to hear this
right?
new piece of music. And I mean composers, not film composers,
Right.
because at least you get like you get dinner and a movie in the process for those ones.
I want to dance, so yeah, it's
Exactly.
yeah, never.
That's because by the orchestra's programming all these old pieces of music, they're classics in their own right, no doubt, but they don't reflect the culture around them. Here in Los Angeles alone, we have a unique opportunity with not just Eurocentric classical music, but we have Mexican music. We have a lot of different kinds of Asian music
Is
as
it Asian?
well
Yeah, Asian hub.
between India
Yeah.
and China and Japan, and like there's so many things going on. Like you can start by programming music that promotes the like I would say the
That is a reflection of the actual people and
yeah
diversity that lives within this space.
that lives within that space, but also they're pushing their boundaries as well too. Like the hardest part, especially when I was doing my master's, was that I was learning about modern music, and by modern I mean like 1900s, and I just couldn't see the relevance behind it. I could see the utilization of this music. I could see it doing film and whatnot, but I couldn't understand how I can get the butts in the seats because of it.
Right.
And that's the key right there, is that there needs to be excitement, and the only way to have excitement is with incentive, and the only way to have incentive is to reflect what's around
An
you.
experience.
Yeah, and just like on my hometown in Florida, we have a lot of Caribbean people there.
Mm.
So people from Trinidad, people from Puerto Rico, from Cuba, from um, Dominican Republic, everywhere, Saint Lucia, and even like not the Caribbean, Philippines, like all of
It's
these
an incredibly diverse space.
extremely diverse, and at the same time, like the musicians in these groups are still talking about like Berlioz and Brahms and Mozart. And I mean, I respect, no doubt, respect,
Absolutely.
but that does not reflect what they've grown up with.
Well, and
Uh,
it doesn't mean that we can't kind of grow and appreciate new things that are inspired by the old.
exactly. I'm not saying that you should twerk at a concert. I mean, that would be very
Just
fascinating.
kidding.
But I am saying that if it doesn't reflect what the culture is going through or what the culture has been through or what the
Yeah.
culture it wants to go to,
Yeah.
then you're not doing the culture any justice. And that makes,
Just missing something wonderful that we could all be enjoying and learning from.
yeah, the orchestra like should be a staple in society. It should be somewhere that brings out the beauty of humanity
And brings us together.
and brings us together. And if you can't program music that does that, then what good are you?
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Damn. So that leaves me to just one last question, which is what do you think that folks listening and watching to the show can do? Because now they've learned so much and they want to help be a catalyst for change. What can they do?
They can make sure that you know your orchestra is around. Like right now, because of COVID, there's not performances happening,
Right.
which means that a lot of businesses and a lot of like, what do you call it, nonprofits are hurting. And this is actually an opportunity to strike while everyone's weak. Like find out who your band directors are. I'm going to actually be compiling a list on my Instagram and probably other social media stuff for specific states, so that way you can actually find out who the band directors are for these highly paid orchestras, and you should send them a message. Say, hey, I noticed that in your program you have Vivaldi. How about we have something from Jihad? And be like,
Or anything that reflects, our culture today.
yeah. If
Or
not,
Jihad.
yeah.
We're going to give you where to find his personal stuff too.
Like as a composer, you got to keep promoting yourself because nobody else is gonna do it.
I get it.
Except for Sarah Williams, because she is,
I'll have you on the show so to give you a microphone to which you can promote yourself.
she's like Ellen, but without the dancing.
Only because I'm restricted right now to this kind of mic.
Yeah, well,
You don't know what the evolution of the show will be.
I feel like
maybe next season it's labs and we're like,
I feel
and
like
then
you're
we're
throwing
twerking
that on
classical
me.
music. Right? Help me, Jihad. No, I want to say thank you for all the help that you've done to make this show possible for me, but also for coming on and kind of sharing your perspective and educating myself and the viewers and watchers on this topic you're incredibly passionate about.
Absolutely.
Where can folks find your work or your website or Instagram handle, anything you'd like to share?
Okay, my website is my name, and I know like it's hard to hear, so it's JEHAD as in dog CHOATE.com, jehadchoate.com. You can find everything that I'm doing there.
Perfect.
I'm also going to be posting a blog about this pretty soon.
Nice. I'll tag your site when I post this and release it. So
perfect.
Who
I will
follow the
retag
socials
your
and all
tag.
that. Okay.
I'll taggity tag.
And then I'll tag your tag.
Yeah.
We'll be stuck in an endless tagging cycle.
Yeah. That's tagrific.
What?
Do we end on a pun? I don't think we should end on that
No,
pun.
we should end on like a fist bump. I feel like.
Okay, we got to do it from 6 feet away.
Okay.
Now.
Well, we're not. We'll just do it like an air. We'll do and then explode it.
Like a Y5? How about like Y5?
No, I want to do the fist bump.
You want to do the fist bump?
1, 2, 3. There it is.
I can change that to like a real sound if you want.
I love it. In post. We'll change it in post. Thank you so much, Jihad. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time on What a Time to Be Alive.